By request from YouTuber John, here is your next video. It is entitled, Why Did God Kill 42 Kids? That sounds kind of crazy. You may not be familiar of the text I'm referring to. So let me read that to you first and foremost here. It comes from 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 through 24, and it's referring to Elisha the prophet. This is what the Bible says. He went up from there to Bethel, and while he was going up on the way, some small boys came out of the city and jeered at him, saying, "Go up, you bald head! Go up, you bald head!" And he turned around, and when he saw them, he cursed them in the name of the Lord. And 2 she-bears came out of the woods and tore 42 of the boys. So, at first glance, you may think, here's some little kindergartners out in recess. They happen to see a bald guy. They all gather up and go, you bald guy! And then all of a sudden, Elisha's all angry for no reason, didn't have his coffee or his bacon, and so he starts yelling at the kids, and then these 2 she-bears come out of the woods and just destroy 42 of them. Is that what happened? We're going to find out today. Thank you for joining me. This is Joel Willoughby, founder of Brains and Bibles. I'm so thrilled for your viewership, bringing you your weekly morsel of high-quality theology. If you have not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the videos you like, provide some interaction in the comments. You can join my Facebook page, Brains and Bibles. You can also make a donation at brainsandbibles.com anytime, but right now there is a GoFundMe charity for Brains and Bibles. All these links I will mention will be in the description below, so check that out. And even right now, there's a $2,000 matching donation out there, so you have a chance to double your investment into eternity through Brains and Bibles. Please also consider a monthly gift for regular support. That would be very helpful. Well, let's get into this thing here. It seems crazy. It seems wrong. I understand. This mystery will take more than just context to solve. We're going to have to do a little linguistic legwork and dig into the culture as well to figure this one out. Okay? So let's dig in. Let's start with the context, though. Earlier in the book, 2 Kings, you have Elijah the prophet. He's the prophet of Israel. And he's coming to the end of his term, and he's about to pass on the mantle to Elisha the prophet. I know it's always confusing, Elijah, Elisha, but bear with me. Okay, so Elijah had a very big reputation, but Elisha made a special request. He asked for double the spirit of Elijah. And Elijah says, well, you'll have that if you get to see me go to heaven, essentially. Well, sure enough, there's these chariots of fire, these horses of fire that separate Elijah and Elisha. And then Elisha sees Elijah go up to heaven in a whirlwind. And so he does get double the spirit of Elijah. Now, I have not confirmed this personally, but I have heard, as far as most recorded miracles in the Bible are concerned, just the most recorded miracles in the Bible, Moses is number 1, Elisha is number 2, and Elijah is number 3. Isn't that interesting? I don't know if that's true or not. It's what I've heard. You should check it out. And it's interesting how you count. Different people count different ways. So it's a little bit confusing, but have fun with it. All right. So Elisha is now this new prophet of Israel. He just finishes up his first work. He's over in Jericho. That's where he's coming out of in this passage I just read. He's over in Jericho, and he cleanses the water there, so there'd be no more death or miscarriage. Apparently, they had some really bad problems. He cleanses the water, and he gets a little trouble as he's leaving Jericho, heading on over to Bethel. This group of small boys, as the ESV calls them, comes out and begins to jeer at him or mock him. Well, let's give a little background on what's going on there. This goes back to King Jeroboam II, not the first. The first King Jeroboam was King Solomon's son. Remember Jeroboam, Rehoboam, they split the kingdom, Israel and Judah, okay? Well, King Jeroboam II, he's king of Israel. Basically, for political reasons, he mass produces idolatry and leads Israel very far astray. He becomes this milestone, this turning point in the wickedness of Israel. Many kings later, they always refer to the sin of King Jeroboam, and that's who they're referring to. Well, you can read more about that in 1 Kings chapter 12 through 16. So this is a land full of false worship and idolatry now. A true prophet of God is not welcome there. Because you see, that lines the bank accounts for many of these people. So a prophet of God coming in, getting rid of idolatry and things, a lot of people are losing money. It's not too welcome. It's not too welcome at all. So there would have been a lot of people angry, losing money and things, trying to run him off. So King Jeroboam II was 8 kings prior to this bear incident that we read about. His push for idolatry was a political move. Like I said, you can read a little more about that in 1 Kings 12 through 16. But part of the thing that he did there was he set up these golden calves in both Dan and Bethel. Remember, Bethel is where Elisha was heading to, so he's almost there. And that was to allow people to not go to Judah to worship. You can worship here at these idols and things, which is pretty horrible. But it worked. The plan worked. But it also made it a hub for idolatry, which was not welcoming to prophets of God. Okay, so there's this group of small boys, as the ESV calls them. Let's figure out what kind of a group this is. Now, in your imagination, I see you probably are thinking of like these little kindergarten kids, right? But reality might be a little bit different than that. So let's go look at the Hebrew word. The Hebrew word behind boys in verse 23 was used to describe Isaac in his mid-20s and Joseph at 17, and also the group of guys that were surrounding the first King Jeroboam that gave him his bad advice, if you look back at that story. So most of these are grown men, and definitely 17, we'd think that's not an adult today, but back then, you were an adult much sooner. So he was definitely an adult then. These are grown men, okay? It was used for a broad range of ages. So then let's look at that word small boys, right? The word behind small there in verse 23, it was many times translated with a range of ages. The age is not the focus of the word. It's the quality of the person, not the age of the person. That's small, okay? So these boys could have been older than David when he killed Goliath, which was after he killed a lion and a bear. So these are people that are very much accountable for their actions. The word small could be referring to the size of the group, like the number in the group. It could be referring to the size, the stature of the young men themselves. It could be shorter, shrimpier, that kind of thing. It could be their social stature. It could also be their maturity level, that they're immature. It could be a broad range of things. This word small in the Hebrew language, okay? This specific word anyways. Then we have boys again in verse 24. That's actually a different Hebrew word than in verse 23. But essentially here, it's basically the same thing. It still has that range that it could be for ages and things. The only real difference is that it could be the offspring of somebody. That's the idea. So nothing really added there except that it still could be people of adulthood. That's the idea. Okay? So I do not think these were little children. I think that these were young men, late teenage, early 20s. Really, it could be even a little bit older than that. Okay? So now let's look at the offense and the curse that Elisha pronounces here. So the offense, it was repeated. Remember, they were mocking him. They're jeering him. They said, "Go up, you bald head." Well, what are they talking about? What's that mean? That's not a common slander nowadays. And it's a sensitive subject. Okay, all right. So they say, "Go up, you bald head." First, let's understand what they said. Why were they saying "go up"? Okay, what does that mean? Where does that come from? Think about what just happened. This is in reference to Elijah going up to heaven. They were mocking it, the whole thing. Yeah, Elijah went up to heaven, just poof, he's gone. Yeah, right. They didn't believe it. They weren't buying it. But you know what they're saying? They're saying, "Why don't you go up? You get out of here. Disappear. Die." They wanted their prophet to die. Get out of here. We never want to see you again. You're not welcome here. That's the idea. Go up. Just go up to heaven with Elijah. We don't want to see you again. Okay, so what were they doing? They were rejecting the prophet of God. They were rejecting the message of God. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Okay, so then they called him bald head, right? Okay, so in that time and culture, more so than here and now, baldness was a major disgrace. It was actually thought of as a significant blemish. And so they were mocking the prophet and trying to run him out by humiliating him. Don't come back here, you bald head. Okay? So that's not too cool. So he was the new prophet. They were a group of young men, possibly a sort of a gang. No respect for him at all. No respect for God. No respect for his person. No respect for God's message. Right? That's what it's all about here. So Elisha then, because of the disrespect for God's message and his work, he cursed them. Okay? Now this is not the same as the American way of saying curse words, and he didn't take God's name in vain. It's nothing like that. Okay? That's some thoughts that are out there. That's not what's going on here. This was simply Elisha pronouncing God's judgment on their wickedness. God then, seeing that this is an appropriate judgment, sends out 2 she-bears. Now it's interesting that they're she-bears. That's an interesting detail, isn't it, to add that they're female? Okay? But I don't think it's a mistake here. That's on purpose. Everyone knows you don't mess with a mama bear and her cubs. Is that right? Yes, that's right. That's the sort of image given here. God protecting his children. That fierce wrath of the mama bear. And so these 2 she-bears come out of the woods at this young street gang, or whatever it is there. And they just tear them apart. This is holy vengeance here. The final questions that you might ask is, how many guys were there total? And how many died? Okay, that's an interesting question. The Bible says that 2 bears tore 42 of them. Notice that it doesn't say kill, it says tore. It also says they tore 42. Well, I wonder how many got away. 2 she-bears caught up with 42 of them. The crowd was probably a bit larger than that. They're all trying to run them out of town. Okay, but the bears got 42 of them. You know the old story. You don't need to run faster than the bear, just run faster than the other guy. Yeah, that's what happened. Okay. So tearing, this is like these bears are just mauling them. We don't have much information to go off of here, except that there's a statistic I found that 14% of people mauled by a bear die. So if we take that statistic, then, you know, a little less than 10 would be probably dying from this. But this was a special occasion. I don't know. We just don't know. But it wasn't that 42 died. It was 42 were tore. They were sliced up a little bit. Okay, that's all we know. Well, I hope this clears up the passage for you a little bit more. Thank you for listening. Again, check out the links in the description below. Consider a donation, even a regular donation, to Brains and Bibles to help further the cause of high-quality theology, making disciples of the world. Thank you so much for listening.